Guten Abend, Herr Brenner. Sie sprechen mit Alden Enterprises. Good evening, Mr. Brenner. You are speaking with Alden Enterprises. Marcus Hill's voice was steady, fluent, flawless. On the other end, silence. Then a surprised chuckle. Finally, Klaus Brenner's voice rumbled, rich with authority. Someone who respects my language. Your CEO refuses to learn a single word. Who am I speaking with? Marcus swallowed. The entire executive floor had gone still. Assistants froze mid-step, jaws slack. Richard Alden himself stood in the doorway, his face a mask of shock and fury. My name is Marcus Hill, sir. I work here. And what is your role, Mr. Hill? The silence was suffocating. Two interns leaned forward, smirking, waiting for him to expose himself. Alden's glare bore into him, daring him to answer. Marcus took a slow breath. I am the cleaner. The room stiffened. The word cleaner hung in the air like a curse. But through the receiver, Klaus chuckled again, louder this time. Well, Mr. Hill the cleaner, you already show more courtesy than half the executives I've spoken to. Tell me, are you familiar with the Zurich contract? Gasps rippled across the floor. Alden's face drained of color. The intern's smirks collapsed into disbelief. And Marcus, once invisible, mocked, dismissed, was suddenly holding a billion-dollar deal in his hand. If you're already hooked by Marcus's bold move, like this video and comment below, let us know what you would do in his shoes. Just moments earlier, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. The executive floor of Alden Enterprises buzzed with panic. Assistants scrambled, papers flew, voices clashed in frantic tones. But in the middle of it all, unnoticed as always, Marcus Hill quietly pushed his mop across the marble floor. He had been invisible for years, a black cleaner in a world of suits and power ties, seen only when someone wanted to sneer. Two interns strutted past, whispering just loud enough for Marcus to hear. Bet he doesn't even understand English properly. Just here to clean our mess. Yeah, imagine him trying to answer one of these client calls. Disaster. They laughed. Marcus's grip on the mop tightened, his jaw clenched. But he stayed silent. Silence was survival. What none of them knew was that Marcus had once been a scholar. Back in Ghana, before America reduced him to a janitor's uniform, he had studied languages, 5 of them fluently. But here no resume or diploma had mattered. His skin had spoken louder than his degree. The CEO's office door burst open. Richard Alden stormed out, red-faced, barking. Why the hell didn't you tell me Zurich was calling? That client is worth $500 million in contracts. Sir, I was just... His assistant stammered. Don't make excuses. If we lose this account, you're finished. The phone blinked again. Zurich calling back. In her panic, the assistant lunged for it, but the receiver slipped from her sweaty hands. It slid across the marble floor, stopping at Marcus's feet. Don't touch that, someone shrieked. You're just the janitor. But Marcus had already picked it up. And with a calm he had buried for years, he spoke. Guten Abend, Herr Brenner. Sie sprechen mit Alden Enterprises. Klaus Brenner's voice came alive on the other end of the line. Mr. Hill, I have explained these concerns to your executives many times, and they brushed me off. Why do you think I should trust this company again? Marcus steadied himself. He could feel every eye on him, burning with disbelief. He had no right to be here, but he had every right to speak. Because your concerns are legitimate, sir, and because this company cannot afford to lose you. If they truly wish to continue with Zurich Holdings, they must honor every clause you set. No shortcuts. Klaus was silent for a moment. Then he said, Interesting. And do you believe Mr. Alden feels the same way? Marcus's chest tightened. Should he speak the truth? Richard Alden was standing just steps away, his glare sharp enough to cut. Marcus took a breath. With respect, sir, I believe Mr. Alden cares about profit first, but I also believe he is wise enough to realize profit will vanish without your trust. There was a pause. Then Klaus laughed again, a low rumble of approval. You speak with honesty, Mr. Hill. A rare quality. Tell me, are you willing to act as my point of contact on this deal? The room gasped. The billionaire client had just offered to bypass the CEO's office for a janitor. Marcus hesitated, stunned. Sir, I am not an executive. I don't care what your title is, Klaus interrupted. I care that you listen and that you respect my words. That is more than I've gotten from your so-called professionals. The line crackled, then went quiet as Klaus waited for an answer. Marcus swallowed hard. If it will help secure this partnership, sir, yes, I will be your point of contact. Excellent, Klaus said firmly. Then let's begin. And just like that, the billionaire client began laying out terms, strict, demanding, but clear. And Marcus, standing there in his janitor's uniform with a mop leaning against the wall, translated every word into precise notes. When the call ended, Klaus's final words echoed through the office. Mr. Hill, I expect updates from you directly. Do not fail me. Good evening. The line went dead. For a moment, silence. Then the office erupted. What the hell do you think you're doing? Richard Alden's voice thundered through the floor. His face was crimson, his fists clenched. He stormed toward Marcus, towering over him. You, a damned janitor. You humiliated me in front of my biggest client. Marcus stayed calm, though his heart raced. Sir, I only spoke the truth. Mr. Brenner was ready to walk away. Don't you dare speak to me about Brenner, Alden roared. You think you're some kind of savior because you babbled in German? You're nothing here. Nothing. You clean floors. The assistants circled, their eyes filled with the same disgust Marcus had seen for years. One of them sneered. This is why we don't let people like you touch the phones. Always reaching above your place. Another added, he got lucky, that's all. Just a janitor trying to play executive. Marcus stood straighter. I may be the janitor, but I just kept Zurich Holdings from leaving. Without that contract, this company loses billions. Richard's hand slammed down on the desk. You dare lecture me? You're a cleaner. You're here because you're cheap labor. Don't ever forget that. The words hit like knives. Marcus had heard versions of them his entire life. In classrooms, on job interviews, on buses and in stores. But this time something in him refused to bow. You can call me what you want, Marcus said quietly, his voice steady. But you can't erase what just happened. You needed me, and I delivered. The intern snickered. Listen to him, acting like a hero. Richard's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, his face inches from Marcus's. His voice dropped to a venomous whisper. If you ever go near my clients again, I'll have you thrown out of this building so fast you won't even have time to collect your mop. The assistant smirked, nodding in approval. To them, Marcus was nothing more than trash that had gotten too close to the fire. But Marcus didn't flinch. He held Alden's glare, his own eyes steady. You can fire me, sir, he said softly, but you can't change the fact that Mr. Brenner asked for me, not you. The words hung in the air like a blade. For the first time, Richard Alden looked shaken. And Marcus, still in his uniform, still holding the phone he wasn't supposed to touch, stood taller than any of them. The next morning, the office was different. Whispers followed Marcus everywhere. The cleaner who spoke German, the janitor who saved the Zurich account. But with every whisper came venom. Don't get too comfortable, one executive muttered as Marcus passed by with his card. Zurich will see through him soon enough, another sneered. Yet when the phones rang again, it was Marcus Brenner demanded to speak with, not Richard Alden, not his polished executives. And so the man who emptied trash bins at night now found himself in the boardroom by day, scribbling notes in German, French, even Spanish. Every language Brenner switched to, Marcus followed effortlessly. The executives sat stiff in their chairs, forced to watch as a janitor became the lifeline of their most important client. But Richard Alden's pride was a wounded beast, and pride is dangerous when mixed with power. That afternoon, he called Marcus into his office. The blinds were drawn, the air thick with tension. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Alden's voice was cold, no longer shouting, but sharper, more deliberate. "Walking around here, taking calls, acting like you belong." Marcus didn't answer. He stood in front of the CEO's massive desk, still in his uniform, hands clasped. Alden leaned forward. "Let me make this clear. You're here to clean floors. That's all. I don't care what languages you speak. I don't care what tricks you pull. This is my company, and I will not be undermined by a janitor." Marcus finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but steady. "I didn't undermine you, sir. I helped you." Alden's eyes narrowed. "Helped me? You embarrassed me. You made me look weak in front of Brenner." "I told him the truth," Marcus replied. "That's what he wanted. Respect. Honesty. You would have lost him otherwise." Alden slammed his fist on the desk. "Don't you dare lecture me about business. You don't know what it means to build an empire." Marcus didn't flinch. "I know what it means to be invisible in an empire, and still find a way to matter." For a moment, Alden said nothing. His breathing was heavy, his fist clenched. Then he stood. "You're walking a thin line, Hill. Keep this up, and I'll make sure no one in this city hires you again. You'll be back on the streets where you belong." Marcus met his eyes. "If that happens, sir, at least I'll know I stood for something." The silence stretched. Alden's face darkened, but he waved him away. "Get out, before I change my mind." The sabotage began the very next day. Marcus returned to find his cart missing, his supplies thrown in the trash. Someone had scribbled on his locker in bold red letters, "Know your place." He ignored it. He had endured worse. But when he walked into the boardroom for the next Zurich call, the executives were ready. "Mr. Brenner, forgive the confusion," one of them said smoothly. "Our cleaner seems to have gotten carried away yesterday. You'll be speaking with us from now on." But Klaus Brenner wasn't fooled. His voice cut through the speaker like steel. "I asked for Marcus Hill, not you." The executives stiffened. Alden's jaw clenched, but they had no choice. The phone was passed to Marcus. "Hey, Mr. Hill," Klaus said warmly. "Tell me, what progress has been made?" Marcus cleared his throat. "Sir, the sustainability report is incomplete. But if the company invests in the new waste reduction program, it will meet your standards." There was silence. Then Klaus replied, "That is exactly what I hoped to hear. You understand me better than your executives." Marcus's notes filled with Klaus's directives. The executives shifted uncomfortably as the cleaner in their midst dictated the flow of the conversation. When the call ended, Brenner added one final line that left the room in stunned silence. "Mr. Alden, if you want my investment, keep Mr. Hill close. Lose him, and you lose me." The line went dead. The boardroom was silent for a long moment. Then the eruption came. "You've humiliated us," one executive snapped at Marcus. "This isn't your place," another barked. Richard Alden's face was pale with fury. "Get out, now!" Marcus gathered his papers quietly, his hands steady even as his heart pounded. At the door, he turned back once. His voice was calm but firm. "You keep saying this isn't my place, but Mr. Brenner made it my place, and you can't change that." He walked out, leaving behind a boardroom of powerful men who suddenly looked powerless. That night, Marcus sat alone in the janitor's closet. The words on his locker echoed in his mind. "Know your place." But for the first time in his life, Marcus wasn't sure those words applied anymore. Because his place might no longer be the floor. The storm came faster than Marcus expected. The next morning, the company lobby was chaos. Headlines were flashing on financial news screens. Zurich Holdings expands partnership with Alden Enterprises. Sources say unlikely hero secured deal. And below in smaller print, janitor turned linguist saves billionaires contract. Every employee stopped to stare when Marcus walked in. Some with disbelief, others with open contempt. He could feel the whispers following him like shadows. "That's him, the cleaner in the paper. He got lucky. It won't last. Embarrassment to the company. By the time he reached his closet, his hands trembled, not from fear from the weight of being seen, when invisibility had always been safer. At noon, the call came, this time not to the office, to Marcus's personal cell phone, a cheap model that barely held charge. Mr. Hill? The deep German accent was unmistakable. This is Klaus Brenner. Marcus nearly dropped the phone. Sir, I want you in Zurich, Brenner interrupted. We're finalizing the contract. I want you at the table. Marcus's breath caught. Sir, I'm just... You are not just anything, Brenner said firmly. You are the only one I trust. Flights are arranged. You leave tomorrow. Click. The line went dead. When Marcus walked into the boardroom to share the news, the explosion was immediate. You what? Richard Alden's voice rattled the glass walls. He invited you? An executive sputtered. To Zurich? At the table? Marcus nodded. Yes, sir. He wants me there. The boardroom filled with angry voices. This is unacceptable. He's overstepping. He's a liability. Richard slammed the table. The room fell silent. Listen to me, Hill. You will not go. You will not step foot on that plane. Do you understand? Marcus's voice was quiet, but steady. With respect, sir, it's not your decision. Mr. Brenner asked for me. The silence cracked into fury. You don't belong in boardrooms, one executive spat. You'll humiliate us on an international stage, another shouted. And then from the corner came words Marcus had heard too many times in his life. He's a janitor, a black janitor. You think billionaires in Zurich want that representing them? The words landed like a fist. Even Richard Alden didn't flinch. He let them hang in the air unchallenged. Marcus stood tall, though his heart burned. What they want is someone who respects them. That's why they chose me. Not because of my skin, not because of my title, but because I listened. The executive scoffed. Richard leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed. You think this ends well for you, Hill? You think you can walk into Zurich like some savior? His voice dropped into a venomous growl. The world doesn't change just because you speak a few fancy words. Men like me built this company. Men like you keep it clean. For the first time, Marcus stepped closer, his voice cutting through the silence. Then maybe it's time men like you realize the world doesn't revolve around the color of a man's skin, but the truth in his words. The boardroom erupted again, but Marcus didn't stay to hear it. He turned, walked out, and left behind a room of men choking on their pride. That evening, the backlash grew uglier. His locker had been painted over in thick black spray paint. Traitor! Inside, his uniform was shredded, his personal belongings gone. Marcus sank onto the bench staring at the destruction. His chest ached, but he refused to break. Not now. Not when he was so close. A voice came from the doorway. One of the interns, the same who once mocked him. You think this company's yours now? You're a joke. When Mr. Alden's done with you, you'll be begging to scrub toilets again. That's where you belong. Marcus looked up at him. His voice was calm, steady. You can take my uniform, you can take my locker, but you can't take what I know, and you can't take the fact that your CEO needs me more than I'll ever need him. The intern faltered, his smirk fading. Marcus stood and walked past him, the weight of years of humiliation sliding from his shoulders. Tomorrow he would be on a plane to Zurich. But in the shadows of his office, Richard Alden plotted. His pride was bleeding, his empire trembling at the thought of being outshined by a janitor. This ends in Zurich, he whispered to himself, staring out at the city lights. One way or another, he won't come back the same. The plane touched down in Zurich under a gray morning sky. Marcus stared out the window, his heart pounding. The farthest he had ever traveled before was to visit family in Atlanta. Now a billionaire's empire hung on his words. At the airport, a sleek black car waited. The driver held a sign that read, Mr. Hill. For the first time in his life, Marcus wasn't arriving somewhere as the invisible worker. He was arriving as the guest of honor. Inside Zurich's financial district, the boardroom was nothing like Alden's. Walls of glass overlooked the Alps, sunlight pouring across a long, polished table. At its head sat Klaus Brenner, flanked by executives in tailored suits. And beside them, Richard Alden. His smile was tight, forced, but his eyes burned with rage. "Ah, Mr. Hill!" Klaus rose, shaking Marcus's hand warmly. "Welcome to Zurich. I trust your flight was comfortable?" Marcus nodded, humbled. "Yes, sir. Thank you for bringing me here." Richard's voice cut in, sharp as a blade. "With all due respect, Herr Brenner, this is highly irregular. My staff and I are more than capable of handling these negotiations." Klaus's smile never faded. "If that were true, Richard, we would not be here. Mr. Hill has earned his seat. Now shall we begin?" Richard's jaw clenched, but he sat. The meeting unfolded like a test of fur. Zurich's lawyers raised clauses, penalties, and sustainability demands. Each time, Marcus translated flawlessly. Not just words, but meaning, tone, nuance, culture. When a French delegate scoffed at Alden's lack of compliance, Marcus switched languages seamlessly, answering with such precision that the delegate blinked in surprise, then nodded approvingly. When a Spanish investor pressed about environmental impact, Marcus responded with facts he had memorized from late-night scraps of overheard meetings. Each answer drew respect. Each word turned the tide. By mid-afternoon, it was clear. Zurich Holdings would sign because of Marcus. But Richard Alden was not finished. During a recess, he cornered Marcus in the hallway, his voice a venomous hiss. "You think this makes you one of them? You think these men will ever see you as more than a black janitor in a borrowed suit?" Marcus met his glare. "They see me as someone who listens, someone who respects them." Richard leaned closer, his breath hot with rage. "Don't be fooled. The moment they're done with you, they'll toss you aside. And when that happens, don't think I'll give you a place to crawl back to." Marcus's voice was steady. "I don't intend to crawl back, sir." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Hill. You're playing a game you can't win." But when they returned to the boardroom, it was Marcus who carried the conversation. The final contract was laid on the table. Klaus Brenner picked up his pen, but paused, looking at Marcus. "Mr. Hill, would you do me the honor of confirming the terms one last time?" The room froze. Richard Alden's face turned white. Marcus glanced around the table. Every powerful man and woman's eyes were on him. He could hear his heartbeat in his ears. He took a breath and began, in German, then French, then Spanish. He recited every clause, every condition, every promise, word for word without hesitation. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Klaus signed with a flourish. "It is done," he declared. "Alden Enterprises retains Zurich Holdings. Thanks to Mr. Hill." Richard's fist tightened under the table, but he forced a hollow smile. That evening, at a gala celebration, Marcus stood awkwardly near the edge of the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, violins played softly, and billionaires mingled with champagne flutes in hand. He didn't belong here. At least that's what a lifetime of voices in his head told him. But then Klaus approached, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Hill," he said warmly, "tonight you are not invisible. You are the man who saved an empire." The words should have lifted him, but across the room, Richard Alden was watching, his expression unreadable. Later that night, when the celebration was over, Marcus returned to his hotel room to find an envelope slipped under the door. Oh, he opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, bold black letters. "This isn't your world. Leave it before it destroys you." His hands tightened around the note. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but he didn't need a name to know where it came from. The next morning, the news broke. Anonymous leaks accused Marcus of falsifying credentials, of lying about his education, of manipulating Klaus Brenner for personal gain. Headlines flared. "Janitor or con man? Doubts rise around Marcus Hill." When he arrived at the Zurich office, cameras were waiting. Reporters shouted questions, shoving microphones toward his face. "Did you lie about your background, Mr. Hill?" Are you exploiting your race to win sympathy? Are you a fraud? Marcus's throat tightened. He wanted to shout, to defend himself, but every word would only fuel the fire. And behind the crowd, standing smug and silent, Richard Alden watched. The headlines wouldn't stop. Janitor turned executive? Or fraud in disguise? Zurich deal tarnished by cleaners' interference. Every newspaper, every financial blog, every whisperer in Zurich seemed to be asking the same question. Who was Marcus Hill, really? By the second day, reporters were camped outside his hotel. When Marcus stepped out, microphones shot forward like weapons. Mr. Hill, did you fake your credentials? Are you manipulating Klaus Brenner? Is this some kind of diversity stunt? One journalist shouted above the noise. Should a black janitor really be allowed to negotiate billion-dollar deals? The crowd laughed cruelly. Cameras flashed. Marcus froze. The words cut deeper than knives. He had no degree to wave, no title to defend himself with. Just his truth, and truth, he knew, was rarely enough. Inside, the Zurich board grew restless. Investors muttered among themselves. Some demanded Klaus cut ties immediately. Richard Alden played the part of reluctant leader. I warned you, he said smoothly. I told you elevating a janitor would backfire. This scandal could sink us all. But Klaus Brenner wasn't moved. He sat forward, his voice sharp. You think I care what headlines say? Marcus spoke my language when no one else would. He delivered this contract when you could not. That is not scandal, that is competence. An executive snorted. Competence? He's a cleaner. He doesn't belong in this room. Klaus's hand slammed the table. The sound echoed like thunder. And yet without him, you would have no deal. Tell me, which of you earned Zurich Holdings' trust? Not Richard, not you. Marcus Hill. The room fell silent. Richard's face tightened, but he said nothing. That evening, Marcus sat alone in his hotel room. The walls felt smaller, closing in. He stared at the hateful words flooding online. Imposter. Token black hire. Go back to cleaning floors. His chest ached. He had survived humiliation before, but this was different. This was the world, united against him. The knock on his door startled him. He opened it to find Klaus standing there, holding 2 glasses and a bottle of wine. May I come in? Marcus nodded silently. They sat at the small table, the city lights of Zurich glowing beyond the window. Klaus poured the wine, his expression softer than Marcus had ever seen. Do you know why I trusted you, Mr. Hill? Klaus asked quietly. Marcus shook his head. Because you reminded me of myself. My father was a factory worker. I was told I didn't belong in these rooms either. But I learned something the world does not give respect, Mr. Hill. You take it by speaking the truth again and again until no one can deny it. Marcus's eyes burned, but he blinked the tears away. What if the truth isn't enough? Klaus leaned forward. Then you make it enough, because the moment you give up, they win. The silence that followed was heavy but steady. For the first time since the smear began, Marcus felt less alone. But Zurich was not America, and the ugliness of racism traveled across oceans. The next day, as Marcus walked through the streets toward the office, a group of men spotted him. Their suits marked them as locals, but their sneers needed no translation. Ah, the famous janitor, one called in German. Here to clean up Zurich now? Another spat at his feet. This is Switzerland, not Harlem. Go home. The others laughed, blocking his path. Marcus's fists clenched, but he said nothing. He stepped past them, his head high, though every muscle in his body screamed to run. By the time he reached the office, whispers had already spread of the confrontation. Some employees chuckled behind his back. Others stared at him with cold eyes. Richard Alden only smiled. Careful, Hill, he murmured as they passed in the hallway. The higher you climb, the further you'll fall. That night, Marcus received an unexpected call. Marcus, it's Lena. It was one of the younger assistants from Alden Enterprises, the only one who had ever treated him with a shred of kindness. I just wanted you to know, she said, her voice nervous. Those leaks about your background, they didn't come from Zurich. They came from Alden's office. Marcus's blood ran cold. You mean? Yes. Richard's been feeding stories to the press. He's trying to ruin you before Brenner can make anything official. Marcus closed his eyes, fury and sorrow colliding inside him. Of course. Alden couldn't stand the thought of being outshined by a black cleaner. Thank you, Lena, Marcus whispered, for telling me the truth. He hung up, staring at the city lights outside his window. The smear campaign wasn't just random cruelty, it was war. And Richard Alden had drawn the first line. The boardroom smelled of polished oak and hostility. Zurich's executives sat in a half circle, their suits sharp, their stares sharper. At the head of the table, Richard Alden wore a mask of confidence, though Marcus could see the smugness leaking from the corners of his mouth. The meeting had barely begun when a stack of documents slid across the table. One of the directors pushed them toward Klaus. These are the reports from the American press, the director said. They raise serious concerns about Mr. Hill's background. No verifiable university record, no corporate history, nothing but employment as a cleaner. The word dripped with disdain. A few chuckles rippled around the table. Marcus's throat tightened. He wanted to speak, but Klaus's hand lifted, stopping him. And what exactly is the accusation here? Klaus asked coolly. That Zurich Holdings is placing billions of francs in the hands of a janitor who has no business negotiating at this level. It undermines our credibility. Richard leaned forward, feigning reluctance. I've tried to shield Mr. Hill, but the truth is painful. His involvement has become a liability. Marcus's jaw clenched. He could feel the eyes burning into him, waiting for his collapse. Every fiber of his body screamed to defend himself, to shout that this was sabotage. But would they even listen? Klaus exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Marcus. Mr. Hill, do you want to answer these accusations? The room held its breath. Marcus looked around at the sneers, the quiet laughter, the skepticism carved into every face. He thought of his mother in Ghana, who had told him, "Your voice is your weapon. Never let them silence it." He rose from his chair. You want to know the truth about me? His voice shook at first, but grew stronger with each word. Yes, I was a cleaner. Yes, I scrubbed floors while you all sat in rooms like this. You look at me and see someone unworthy. But while I cleaned, I listened. While you dismissed me, I learned. I know your deals, your contracts, your failures. Not because someone gave me a title, but because I refused to stop learning even when the world called me worthless. The room was still. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others narrowed their eyes. Richard smirked, certain Marcus's speech would be seen as defiance. Marcus leaned forward. Do you know why Zurich almost walked away? Because this company under Richard Alden thought profit mattered more than responsibility. He ignored your demands for accountability. He gambled with your trust. And when I repeated your words back to you, in your language, you knew I had listened when no one else would. That is why we still have this contract. Not because of Richard, because of me. His voice echoed off the boardroom walls. His chest heaved. For a heartbeat, silence. Then Richard laughed, a cold, sharp laugh that sliced the tension. Impressive speech, Richard sneered. But words are cheap. You can polish them just like you polish the floors. At the end of the day, you're still just the help, and Zurich Holdings doesn't trust the help with billions of dollars. A murmur of agreement spread among some of the executives. The weight of racism pressed down heavy, suffocating, undeniable. Klaus raised a hand. Enough, his voice was steel. I've heard all I need. This contract will move forward. Richard's face twitched. With respect, Klaus. With Marcus Hill as our liaison. Klaus finished firmly. Gasps, murmurs. Richard slammed his fist on the table. This is madness. He doesn't belong here. Klaus's eyes burned into him. He belongs here because he earned it. And if you cannot respect that, Richard, then perhaps it is you who doesn't belong here." The room fell into stunned silence. Later, Marcus sat alone in the corridor, his head in his hands. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on him like a mountain. Klaus had defended him, but at what cost? The whispers would not stop. The hate would not stop. His phone buzzed. A new article flashed across the screen. Cleaner challenges. CEO in Zurich boardroom chaos ensues. The comments were worse. "He'll never be more than a janitor. This is diversity gone insane. Next they'll let the gardener run the IMF." Marcus tossed the phone aside, his chest tightening. The victory in the boardroom felt hollow. How long before the pressure broke him completely? That night he wandered Zurich's streets, lost in thought. The neon lights blurred through his tears. For years he had endured quiet humiliation. Now he was enduring it publicly, globally, amplified by headlines and prejudice. At the edge of the river he stopped, staring at his reflection in the dark water. "Maybe Richard's right," he whispered. "Maybe I don't belong." But then, another memory surfaced, his mother's voice again. "The world will tell you no, Marcus, but if you accept it, they win. Never let them win." He straightened slowly, wiping his face. No, he would not give them that satisfaction. They could smear him, laugh at him, drag his name through the mud. But he had already done the impossible, and he wasn't done yet. Tomorrow he would walk back into that boardroom, not as a cleaner, not as an imposter, but as Marcus Hill, the man who saved a billionaire's empire when everyone else failed. And this time, he would not just defend himself. He would fight back. The next morning, Zurich buzzed with tension. The financial press was ablaze. Janitor versus CEO, who will Zurich trust? Stock analysts speculated on live television. Investors whispered in private circles. And on social media, Marcus's name trended alongside the words fraud and hero. Marcus knew the storm wasn't dying down. If anything, it was building. And Richard Alden was fanning the flames. But Marcus had something Richard didn't, the truth. In the Zurich office, Marcus found Lena waiting for him. She looked pale, her eyes darting nervously. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, handing him a small folder. "But you need this." Inside were copies of internal emails. Marcus skimmed them, his breath catching. They were from Richard, dozens of them. To journalists feeding them selective background about Marcus. To rival investors, mocking Klaus's obsession with a janitor. To board members, hinting at fabricated misconduct. But buried deeper was something bigger, an email chain about the Zurich deal itself. Richard had deliberately stalled compliance with sustainability clauses, hoping Klaus would back down under pressure. He had gambled that Zurich would sign anyway. Marcus's chest tightened. This wasn't just sabotage against him. Richard had endangered the entire company's future out of arrogance. Lena's voice shook. "If the board sees these, it'll ruin him." Marcus closed the folder carefully. "No, it'll reveal him." That evening, Marcus requested a private meeting with Klaus. The billionaire's office overlooked the city, its glass walls glowing with the reflection of the river. Marcus laid the folder on Klaus's desk. "These are Richard's emails. He's not just attacking me. He sabotaged the Zurich deal from the start. He never intended to meet your conditions. He thought you'd cave." Klaus read in silence, his jaw tightening with each page. When he looked up, his eyes burned. "I knew Alden was arrogant," he said, "but this..." He slammed the folder shut. "If this is true, then Richard Alden has no place in business." Marcus hesitated. "What happens if we expose him? The press already thinks I'm a fraud. They'll say I forged this or that I'm making it up to protect myself." Klaus leaned forward. "That is why we won't let you fight alone. You've proven your integrity to me. Now I will stand with you. Tomorrow we confront him together." Marcus felt a flicker of strength in his chest. For once he wasn't invisible. For once someone believed him. The next day the Zurich board convened again. Cameras flashed outside. The world waited for an answer. Richard strode into the room, his confidence blazing. He smirked when he saw Marcus. Still here, Hill. I thought you'd have packed your mop by now. Marcus said nothing. He slid the folder across the table. Klaus's voice rang out. Before we continue, there are documents you all need to see. As the board members skimmed the pages, the air grew heavy. Murmurs broke out. Some gasped. One director turned sharply to Richard. Is this true? You intentionally stalled compliance? You lied to us? Richard's face flushed. This is ridiculous. Obviously forged by him. He jabbed a finger at Marcus. The janitor's desperate, so he makes up evidence. You're all falling for a trick. But Klaus stood. His voice carried the weight of finality. The emails were verified through Zurich's own servers. They are authentic. The room erupted. Board members shouted over each other. Some called for Richard's resignation. Others demanded an investigation. Richard's mask cracked. His voice rose, panicked. You can't do this to me. I built this company. You think some black janitor gets to take me down? He's nothing. The words hung in the air like poison. Every face turned toward him, stunned. For a moment, even the racists in the room couldn't defend what they'd just heard. Marcus rose slowly, his voice calm but unshakable. You've just proved my point, Richard. You don't see me as a man or as someone capable. You see me as less. But today the world sees you for what you are. A liar, a coward, and a racist who gambled away his own empire. Richard's face twisted, but the damage was done. The room had turned against him. Outside, the press swarmed. Cameras clicked furiously as Klaus and Marcus stepped into the light together. A reporter shouted, Mr. Hill, are you staying with Zurich Holdings? Marcus paused. He had dreamed of this moment of being recognized not as invisible, but as essential. Yet the journey had taught him something deeper. I don't know where this path leads, Marcus said carefully, but I do know this. I will not be silenced, and I will not let lies define me. I was a cleaner. I was invisible, and now the world sees me. Not because I changed who I am, but because I refused to stay silent when truth needed to be spoken. The crowd erupted. Some applauded, some jeered. But Marcus stood tall, the flashbulbs lighting his face. For the first time, he wasn't hiding. And Richard Alden? His empire was crumbling before the world's eyes. Richard Alden's downfall came faster than anyone expected. Within 24 hours, Zurich's newspapers ran the story. CEO lied to investors, tried to frame black janitor. Emails exposed Alden's racist sabotage. Television anchors dissected every word from the board meeting. Business analysts speculated whether Alden Enterprises could survive without its founder. Social media tore him apart. Richard, once untouchable, was now toxic. Sponsors pulled out, shareholders revolted. His resignation was demanded publicly, and by week's end, he was gone, escorted out of the same glass tower where Marcus had once been told to stay invisible. But for Marcus, vindication wasn't as simple as celebration. Walking back into the New York headquarters felt surreal. Employees stared openly, some with admiration, some with resentment, others with guilt, remembering the times they had laughed at him, ignored him, mocked him. Lena approached shyly. Marcus, I just want to say I'm sorry for every time I stayed quiet when they disrespected you. Marcus gave her a tired smile. You were the only one who ever treated me like a human being. You don't owe me an apology. Word spread quickly. Marcus wasn't just back, he was here in a new role. Klaus had appointed him as Zurich's direct liaison, an unprecedented move that gave him influence in shaping multi-billion-dollar contracts. And yet, as he sat in an office for the first time, his own desk, his own nameplate, Marcus felt a strange emptiness. For years, he had dreamed of being seen, respected. Now that it was here, it didn't erase the scars. The humiliation, the racism, the years of invisibility still weighed heavy. One evening, he visited the janitor's break room. The smell of coffee and cleaning chemicals hit him like memory. The other cleaners looked up in shock. Marcus, one whispered, what are you doing here? Don't you belong upstairs now? Marcus shook his head. I belong here too. He sat down, pulling out a chair like old times. Don't ever think because they call you invisible that you are. I learned more in this room than I ever did in a boardroom. We know the truth of this place, even when they pretend we don't. A quiet pride spread among the staff. For once, someone had taken their side. Still, the fight wasn't over. Not in America. On the subway ride home, Marcus overheard two men talking. Crazy, right? That janitor running billion-dollar deals. Yeah, the other scoffed. World's gone mad. Next thing you know, they'll let bus drivers run Wall Street. They laughed loud and cruel. Marcus stared out the window, forcing himself not to react. He realized something. The victory in Zurich hadn't ended racism. It had only revealed it more clearly. But instead of despair, a fire lit inside him. If he could survive Zurich, he could survive this too. Weeks later, Zurich Holdings hosted a gala to celebrate the signed contract. Executives from across the world gathered under glittering chandeliers. Cameras flashed. Speeches were made. And then Klaus Brenner stepped up to the microphone. Tonight, I want to thank a man who reminded me why integrity matters more than arrogance, and why listening matters more than titles. Please welcome Marcus Hill. The applause was thunderous, but also divided. Some clapped with genuine admiration, others politely, and a few not at all. Marcus walked onto the stage, the lights blinding. He took a breath. I was asked to speak tonight, he began, but I won't give you a polished speech. I'll give you the truth. The room quieted. I was a cleaner. For years, I walked past rooms like this one, carrying trash while people in suits laughed at me. I was told I didn't belong, that I wasn't worthy of being heard, and when I finally spoke, they tried to destroy me. Not because I was wrong, but because I was black and invisible, until I forced them to see me. Some executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Marcus's voice grew steadier. I don't stand here tonight because I wanted revenge. I stand here because I want change. I want a world where the next janitor, the next driver, the next so-called nobody with talent doesn't have to wait for a miracle to be recognized. Where dignity doesn't depend on a title. Where skin color doesn't decide whose voice matters. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by a few scattered claps that grew into applause. Not everyone clapped, but enough did, and Marcus knew that was a start. Later that night, Klaus found him outside on the balcony, staring at the city lights. You spoke from the heart. Klaus said softly. Marcus exhaled. I'm not a polished speaker. I'm just me. That's why they listened, Klaus replied. Then after a pause, what will you do now? Continue with Zurich? Marcus looked out at the skyline. Maybe, but I think my fight is bigger than one company. People need to hear what happened. They need to know the truth about how the world treats those it calls invisible. Klaus smiled faintly. Then perhaps this was never about saving my contract. Perhaps it was about saving something larger. Marcus nodded slowly. For the first time, he saw it clearly. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was purpose. By the time the night ended, Marcus Hill wasn't just the man who saved a billionaire's client. He was the man who had forced the world to see him, and by doing so, given hope to countless others who had been told they didn't belong. And deep down, Marcus knew. This was only the beginning. Weeks turned into months. The scandal faded from headlines, but Marcus Hill's name did not. Invitations poured in universities, civil rights groups, even corporations that once ignored him now begged him to speak about his journey. At first, Marcus hesitated. He was no public speaker, no polished executive. But then he remembered the nights he mopped the marble floors while listening to men in suits talk carelessly about billions. They hadn't been smarter. They hadn't been wiser. They had simply been heard. And Marcus had learned the hardest truth of all. Power was not about titles. It was about voice. His first major speech was at Howard University. The auditorium was packed, the energy electric. Students leaned forward, eager to hear the man who had gone from cleaner to corporate giant killer. Marcus stood at the podium, his palms sweating. But when he began, his words flowed not like a lecture, but like a confession. I was invisible for most of my life, he said. Not because I wanted to be, but because the world decided I should be. When people looked at me, they didn't see intelligence, or ambition, or possibility. They saw a black janitor, and they thought that was the beginning and end of my story. The students murmured, nodding. But I want you to understand something, Marcus continued. They were wrong. Every time they laughed, every time they dismissed me, every time they thought I wasn't listening, I was learning. Knowledge doesn't belong to the rich. Dignity doesn't belong to the powerful. And when your moment comes, when you finally step out of the shadows, you will find that your struggle has made you stronger than anyone ever imagined. The room erupted in applause, students rising to their feet. Marcus's chest tightened with emotion. He realized he wasn't just telling his story, he was giving them permission to believe in their own. Meanwhile, Richard Alden's empire collapsed. Investigations revealed years of corruption. Lawsuits drained his fortune. Once hailed as a titan of business, he was reduced to a cautionary tale, a man whose arrogance destroyed him. When reporters asked Marcus for comment, he said only, "Richard Alden didn't fall because of me. He fell because of his own lies." But privately, Marcus understood the deeper irony. Alden had tried to erase him. Instead, Alden erased himself. Marcus's life changed in ways he could never have imagined. He traveled across the world, meeting cleaners, porters, drivers, all the people society called invisible. In their eyes, he saw the same struggle and the same resilience. One evening, after a long day of speaking, he returned to his small apartment in Harlem. It wasn't luxurious, not like the suites Zurich had offered, but it was home. On his table sat an old photo of his mother in Ghana. He picked it up, running a finger across the glass. "I made them see me, Mama," he whispered, "and I'll make them see all of us." Months later, Marcus stood before the United Nations, addressing leaders from around the globe. His story had become larger than a contract, larger than Zurich, larger than Richard Alden. He looked out at the sea of faces, powerful and skeptical, just as the Zurich board once had been. "I was once told," Marcus began, "that I didn't belong in the rooms where decisions are made. But I am standing here today to tell you those rooms do not belong to the powerful. They belong to the people, to the workers who clean your offices, to the immigrants who build your cities, to the voices you try to silence. We belong here, because without us, your empires would crumble." His voice rang through the chamber. Some leaders frowned, others nodded solemnly, but no one could ignore him. As he stepped down, journalists rushed forward. "Mr. Hill, do you see yourself as a hero?" one shouted. Marcus paused, then shook his head. "No, I see myself as proof. Proof that being invisible doesn't mean being powerless. Proof that no matter how much they try to silence us, our voices will rise." That night, as Marcus walked through the quiet streets of New York, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. The struggle wasn't over. Racism still lived, injustice still thrived. The world was still cruel to those who looked like him, but he was no longer invisible. And because of that, maybe, just maybe, someone else would dare to stand taller tomorrow. Marcus Hill, once dismissed as a janitor, now carried something greater than wealth or power. He carried a story, a weapon, a shield, and a light. And that story, once unheard, was now unstoppable.